Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sama's Kitchen. Today is Christmas Day, and as you can see, I'm in my Christmas jammies and enjoying a relaxing morning and afternoon with my husband Jeffrey. And I decided to make one of his favorite dishes, which is also one of the most simple dishes to make this time of year, as there tend to be an abundance of apples around. And it's very easy to make those apples into applesauce. And it's a very simple process. You can choose whether or not to peel your apples. Today I'm choosing to peel the apples just for a textural quality that I like to have in applesauce with no peels. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity while peeling the apples to share some stories about applesauce and why I love applesauce, and maybe Jeffrey will pipe in with some stories about why he loves applesauce, and then maybe we'll talk about some other things as well. For me, homemade applesauce was always a real treat. Look at that perfectly naked apple. It would be something that my grandmother, Noni, would make. We would go to her house during the holidays, and you could always smell the applesauce when entering the house. And I knew that there was a tastiness going to be happening. And other things she used to make that would have a similar smell were apple pie, baked apples. Applesauce always had just that wonderful simplicity to it, the smell of the cinnamon. And somehow she managed to make the texture of the apples and the saucy part of the apples just right. So I'm going to attempt something similar to my grandmother's recipe. Now, of course, if you grew up eating store-bought applesauce, there's something nice about that applesauce that's all blended up. And sometimes I will choose to blend up the applesauce and make that kind of applesauce when I'm making homemade. Another easy way to make applesauce that I discovered when you have an abundance of apples is to first just cut up the apples and put them in the dehydrator. And then all you need to do is, if you have a bunch of dehydrated apples, you can just put them in a pot with some water and rehydrate them. It takes quite a bit of water, surprising amount of water, to rehydrate the apples, and they don't have to cook very much at all. Just get rehydrated and warm, and add some cinnamon, and you've got a lovely applesauce. You can make the same. You can do the same thing for apple pie, where you have the dehydrated apples, and you put them in the pie with enough water and cook them up, and you've got apple pie or apple tart. And you can also make something called a compote with fresh or dried apples and other fruits, which this applesauce is kind of like that, but a compote will tend to have other fruits in it as well, and also dried fruits. So you might put prunes, raisins, pears, dried apricots. You could get exotic, go for dried pineapples, whatever flavors you might want to have in there. Yeah. And, yeah. So here we go, peeling these lovely apples. And I'll be right back with showing you the next step, which is cutting them into the perfect little slices. All right, here I am back with a knife. And the first step, of course, is to cut the apples, the peeled apples, into quarters and core them. Now there are other fancy ways of doing this. You can get an apple peeler corer, which is quite a fancy contraption that holds the apple and spins it around. You turn a handle and it spins the apple around, and there's a component of the machine that cuts out the core, sort of a round knife that cuts out the core as you spin the apple, and then there's another component that goes around the outside of the apple and peels the core off just as you're spinning the apple through that component. And it also slices the apple into this beautiful spiral shape, which is very nice. If you have lots of apples, it speeds up the process. But there's something delightful about just hand cutting and hand slicing the apples. I'm going to aim down a little bit so that you can see. Here I have 4 quarters of this apple, and I'm going to make long slices here. That's a really nice shape, and it's kind of thin there. So I like this because it incorporates a macrobiotic principle with the fruit, and that is that each bite, each morsel includes the yin and the yang of the fruit. So the yin is the gathered energy, where the fruit or the vegetable comes together. So this end here and this end here are the yin energy, and as it's coming in, that's the yin energy of the fruit. The yang energy of the fruit is the expanded energy. So where the fruit is the fattest is the yang. So as you can see here, each slice has the yin at the gathered tip and the yang in the fat middle. And so that's a principle of macrobiotic cooking to include that. So when we cut the core out, we want to minimize how much of the core we take out. So I try to really carefully carve out as little as possible. But also there are some tough encasings for the seed that are that never really soften up when you're cooking, and texturally it kind of, you're enjoying your unctuous applesauce, and then suddenly you have this sort of sharp little chewy part, and it's a little bit of a downer on your applesauce high. So I try to cut out as much of that as possible, while still keeping as much of the yin energy, the gathered ends, so that we have a balanced energy in our food. So here we have it, and I'm placing these balanced fruits into my crock pot here. A crock pot, a slow cooker, is a wonderful way to make applesauce because you can just turn it on and leave it on overnight. It's one of my favorite things to do if I have to get up early in the morning and go somewhere, go on a trip, or I have an early work day, to have something tasty like that ready for me in the crock pot for breakfast. And I really enjoy doing that. And when I took that little break to go get my knife and get ready for the slicing of the apples, my husband Jeffrey told me that it was his great-grandmother that used to make applesauce for him, and that's why he has such a fondness for applesauce. Certain foods and smells tend to bring back the emotional quality of the memories that we have around those foods. And he seems to, and I do too, we have positive memories about eating applesauce that grandma or great-grandma made for us. And so it just feels so nourishing to, that's why we have certain foods that we call comfort foods, because grandma or some loved one made those foods for us. So here I go slicing these apples away, and I'll continue doing so and come back when it's ready for the next step to show you. Hi, so as I'm slicing away here, I'm realizing that this is a wonderful opportunity for meditation, and that's why I chose to do the sort of the slow method of hand peeling and hand slicing the apples today, because with each slice I'm touching every single piece of the apple, and I'm putting my intentions in for this next year. I'm putting all those grandmotherly, motherly, nourishing feelings, those feelings of love and nourishment for myself and for my husband and for whoever else I might share this applesauce with. I'm just bringing that awareness into my actions, and you can take that opportunity when you're doing it for any way that you would like to infuse this applesauce with magic and healing. If you want to say some prayers, there's an apple tree right outside here in the garden that I'm going to be starting soon, and I would like to dedicate this first batch of apple goodness that I'm making in this new home to a lovely relationship with the plants and animals. There's a bird right now eating one of the apples that is still hanging in the tree. And I'm just so grateful to be here and surrounded by the goodness of nature and the apple tree, and the beginning of a new relationship with a new garden. And it's also a feeling of coming home too. This is an area that I've lived in before, and I was away for a period of time, so this is sort of a homecoming applesauce for me as well. So just feel free to allow yourself to meditate when you're making your handmade applesauce, to meditate on all of those wonderful feelings of home and nurturance, and so that's a lovely meditation. Okay, so I've peeled and cut quite a few apples, and there's just such a simplicity to this recipe that there's only one more step. There's a couple of optional steps, but I'll show you here. We have the, hold on one second, we have the apples in the pan. See if you can see that. This is the slow cooker, and I'm going to sprinkle some cinnamon on there. And then all I do next is stir it up and plug it in and turn it on. And I can leave it there for as long as I want. It can go overnight. It can, just the longer you cook it, the sweeter and more delicious the apples are. That's the wonderful thing about using the slow cooker. I put the lid on. You could add some sweetener if you wanted to, but I like the natural sweetness of the apples, and the sweetness of the cinnamon is just perfect for me. If you wanted a little sweeter, you could add anything from maple syrup to dates to raisins, or anything that would add a little more sweetness to it. Apple juice is nice. If you want to add a little liquid, some water or apple juice, you can add some potato starch or cornstarch to give a thick kind of a syrup between the apples if you like. There's all kinds of variations of the applesauce, but I just like the straight apples and the cinnamon. So simple and so delicious. So it'll be a little while until it's ready, and I can show you that. All right, take care.